Hello, and welcome to Canopy's Impact Lab for June 2025, Responsible Data Management. Impact Lab is a series of virtual sessions that equip your business to make real-world change and to have a better impact on Kentucky's economy, communities, and landscapes. You'll hear from subject matter experts and business luminaries about practical ways to grow intentionality and manage your impact. If you have a question or a comment you'd like to contribute, please let us know in the chat function, and our behind-the-scenes star, Ben Soli, will invite you to join the stream. Without further ado, today we will be hearing from Sean Herbig and Ben Rena-Weber. Sean Herbig is the president and founder of IQS Research, a marketing, research, and data analytics firm based here in Louisville, Kentucky. For over a quarter of a century, the team at IQS has been delivering market-changing insights on a variety of topics, including food insecurity, education, business profitability, manufacturing, and healthcare, just to name a few. Sean is also an adjunct instructor teaching research methods in U of L's MSBA program. Ben is a serial entrepreneur at the intersection of technology and social good, and currently CEO of startup Essential Innovations. Again, during the presentation, please submit your name in the chat function to be called on, or just ask your question in the chat, and the speakers will respond during the Q&A session at the end. And now, I'll turn it over to Ben to kick us off.
Thanks, Adam. Super excited to be here today with you guys. Super excited to begin a robust conversation around, the perils and the promise of data management, particularly in an age of rising AI. I think the piece that I'm most interested in thinking about and exploring today is really what are the core functions that we can look at as resources within the data that we either already collect or easily could collect to create value for our businesses. And I think about things like, okay, how do we help our employees get the maximum benefits out of their the existing insurance resources that we pay for them? How do we help them connect to external resources? How do we look at our customer data and say, all right, well, if we are going to segment in these ways, things that were previously hard are now easy. And I think there's a lot of untapped value to be unlocked there. So that's what I'm excited about working on and excited to be talking to you about today.
Great, thanks, Ben. Sean, do you want to follow up?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So great to be here. Glad to be part of the panel. My name is Sean Herbig. I'm the president and founder of IQS Research. As was mentioned in the intro, so IQS Research is a research and data analytics firm based here in Louisville, Kentucky. And really what I wanted to bring in today is sort of to complement a lot of the great cool stuff that Ben's doing. But I really wanted to talk about, as you're collecting data, as you're sort of collecting or collating or putting together data, what are the responsibilities that you have either as an entrepreneur or as an innovator or as an analyst or as a business owner? Because we're pulling in we're just quite frankly, we're pulling in and we're aggregating and we're compiling data in ways that it just hasn't been done before. And that's totally cool. I'm 100% in favor of that. But then when we start looking at things like, gosh, now I have this person's name and I have their IP address, and maybe I have a little bit of health information in there, maybe a little bit of things like social security number if it's an employee. What are my responsibilities as an employer? And if I'm the employee, what are my expectations for confidentiality for that information? Because we're able to produce data faster and faster than we've ever been able to do it before. And I think sometimes we just kind of forget that velocity sort of imbues some responsibility. So I'm looking forward to having some conversations about that as well, and just how forward thinking also ties in with responsibility too.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Let's start off with maybe trying to make some kind of concrete examples of the kinds of things we're talking about. We drop a lot of phrases, but frankly, I get pretty lost quickly when some of these tech words start being bandied about. And as a small to medium business owner, I think sometimes I'm not sure what my opportunities are when it comes to data capture and usage, and what the kind of low-hanging fruit obstacles might be. Like what are the most obvious things I could do as a business owner that could be beneficial, and what are the most obvious sort of pitfalls I ought to avoid? Ben, do you want to kick us off there?
Sure. I mean, I think, particularly as in resource constrained environments, people talk about data and AI and all of this, and then you're immediately like, okay, great, chatbots. What do I do? You said like, part of what we want to talk about is like, what are the concrete things? And I think the first step in that is really thinking about what are the problems that we face as a business that are real problems that the new technologies or data, the new ability to analyze data can solve. Because I think if we start with the tool, like to a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
And that's the wrong direction. Like we really need to be saying like, okay, particularly in the arena of what are the things that my team or I am spending time doing that is repetitive, or where being able to say, can I get more narrow and targeted by pulling out an insight that used to be hard and now is easy? So you said, let's get concrete. Here's a super concrete example. How many pieces of paper do the people that I hire have to fill out where the data is the same over and over and over again? Like, that's a really easy spot where automation can help us. Some of the things that we're seeing in the sales process are these email automations, some of which are really annoying, but many of which, particularly if they are crafted and shaped so that the human is involved, but the AI does the back work, can really relieve us of like, oh man, I sent this email Tuesday, did it get followed up on? And now the systems that we're seeing, like I use a system called Superhuman, will suggest for me language. Hey, Adam, just following up on this. And it gives me a draft that at least is something to reflect on, which pulls some of the annoying parts of calendar management off of my plate. So that's an easy example.
Yeah, so I like that that the first example you brought up is not trying to utilize AI to take over something that we do, but to give us that first draft, to make the kind of initial jump into a task a little bit easier. Are there, Sean, any other ways you can think of that the tools you utilize at IQS might make that sort of initial jump into a task easier rather than just deleting it from human workflow?
Yeah, so we use a lot of automation, and I don't know if that's exactly what we would call AI, right? Because sometimes AI is getting better at like helping us sort of go, hey, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? But we're sort of a big fan of setting up, again, within the research process, how can we go through a medium amount of work in the beginning so that then the next 3 weeks or the next 4 milestones are automatically scripted out and they're just going to happen on their own, right? So we're a big fan of just sort of like taking the individual discrete sort of human element out of it, so that it just sort of happens as it just sort of naturally happens sort of in the background, if you will. But I want to go a slightly different way, if we can, because I love some of the stuff that Ben was saying in the very beginning. And he said, how many pieces of paper have to be filled out, right? And paper can be sort of metaphorical, right? It can just be, forms, and they can be electronic. But if you think about a company, most companies, right, or like my company, have been around a quarter of a century. So in the beginning, we founded the company in '99, so it was a lot of paper. And so you think about that and you go, well, where is that paper? Again, I'm just going to put the responsibility hat on. Where is that paper? And you think about some really sensitive stuff that you have there. Like, let's just take a small business with their employees. Those I-9 forms that were filled out 10 years ago. Well, are they still sitting in a file cabinet someplace? Because that's got a lot of pretty sensitive information on it. Maybe somebody goes, well, you know what? We scanned all those 5 years ago. Great. First of all, what'd you do with the paper? Is it shredded, or did you scan it and now you've got a duplicate copy because now you still have the paper? Or maybe you scanned it and where's it sitting? Is it sitting on Joe's laptop with the passwords written down on his keyboard. Is it encrypted? Is it just how secure is the storage? So we generate all the time a whole lot of data that can get really sensitive, or we possess a whole lot of data that can get really sensitive. And again, as we're doing this, what protocols and what sort of safety standards are we implementing along the way to make sure that we don't unintentionally have I don't know, somebody breaks into the office and now all of a sudden Sally Sue's I-9 form is all of a sudden busted, or out on the internet or something.
So I love this. And can I follow up on that? Because I think one of the really interesting things that you're talking about is the danger of this sort of data cloud that we create. And then also I want to highlight some of the opportunity of data that we have. And I'll just define data as like any piece of information that is connected to our business.
Yep.
Because I think, one of the things that we're always looking for is, all right, who are our best customers? Or from a marketing perspective, who are our best advocates? And I'll just pile on because you said employee data. An interesting idea in a universe in which we need advocates and we want people who are rooting for us is, if we've been good employers, often our current or past employees are our best advocates.
Yep.
So if we're looking from a marketing perspective for influencers who understand the space, and we could go back to our old employees and say, hey, look, I'm about to launch this thing. Or would you be willing to give a testimonial?
Mm-hmm.
I was on a great session the other day where a woman said, the most important thing for small businesses in attracting new customers is Google reviews. Can we get everybody who's in this room to go give a Google review right now? And that's a sort of untapped opportunity in the existing data that you already have. With your current customers, with your former employees, to really create some value relatively easily using that data.
Well, one of the things that I love about the way you approach this, Ben, and you've said it a couple of times, and I just really want to sort of emphasize it, is think about the problem first. So take a problem first approach as opposed to a tool first approach. And I just could not love that more, because I think that ends up getting us where technology becomes the enabler of this problem we're trying to solve, or the enablement of solving the problem, if you will, as opposed to this sort of novelty that we just sort of like all get around and go, okay, what are we going to do with it? Well, if you start with the problem first, then you kind of know what you're trying to do with it, because that problem sort of becomes the guidepost, if you will. And I just love that approach.
Yeah, Sean, I want to follow up on that a little bit too. You mentioned that we kind of earlier talked a little bit about actual pieces of paper, and I want to highlight that too. That I think often we kind of get lost in this sort of haze of everybody talking about AI with everything, and we assume that this kind of cloud-based Uber God thing is just going to deliver us all of our data management, but it really is much more physical than that often. And, we used earlier the phrase meat space, that there's actual data in like human rooms written down on pieces of paper, and that data can be a lot of different things. So for companies that might not put most of their business on a computer, for instance, a restaurant, a bar, a kitchen,
Sure.
How do companies like that really find the best opportunities to leverage what data they have in order to better serve their customers, or to better serve their employees, or to have a better impact on their communities?
Well, can I pause for a second, Adam? Because you said something interesting, and I think this is, I don't want to lose it. Even companies that are very physical, a restaurant being a perfect example, like those employees and customers live much of their lives in the digital universe. I heard this stat the other day that 90-something% of Medicaid recipients have a smartphone. Okay. I mean, that's probably the most marginalized part of our population. And so there is a way to acknowledge and deal with the fact that they might not sit at a desktop computer. And many of the things that the innovations in this space are geared towards desktop workers. But, they're on their smartphones, They're there on breaks. They can do a lot of this, what was previously physical online, just not in the same way that the engineers or often decision makers in this space think about. So I just think that's one of the, invite yourself as the HR person, the CEO, to be thinking about your workers from that perspective, because the way they engage with this technology is different than you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. We are kind of none of us Luddites anymore, unless you literally run an Amish farm. Chances are everybody you interact with has a pretty robust virtual or digital profile out there somewhere. But again, what are the easiest things we can do, assuming all of our work doesn't happen in that digital space, understanding that employees and customers are still present in that digital space? What are some of the easiest things we can do to make their lives or work or situations better because of the data that we happen to have or not have about them?
I think it kind of comes down to, what are we trying to do in this particular case with the employees or with our customers or whatever, right? Ben gave some examples in the beginning. What benefits are employees eligible for, right? So that's a great one. If you're trying to go at the marketing angle, like you mentioned, then okay. To me, it's less about going, okay, I've got these employees, and what am I going to do with them? To me, it's more about going, okay, I have this marketing challenge if I'm trying to grow. Again, I'm trying to grow my company, and one of the tools I want to use for that is ambassadors. Okay, cool. Then who are the ambassadors that I'm going to use? And that would include a much broader list, right? So it could include customers, and it could include, maybe really great vendors that I've used, or it could include previous employees or current employees, whatever. But the idea is, I've got this thing I'm trying to do on the front end, and then where do all of these things come into play? I want to give an example if I can, and this is an example from a client. They're using AI in one of, I think, a super cool way, although I think there are a lot of companies doing some cool stuff. But they've got, so the genesis of this company, the history of this company is they've got a ton of data on household appliances, right? Not real sexy: washers, dryers, ovens, water heaters, HVAC, the real cool stuff that we all show off in our homes, right? But they've got this on hundreds of millions of appliances across, the last few decades. So you see where this is going. I saw Ben go, hey, wait a minute. Okay, so here's what this guy's doing, right? So we ran some feasibility testing on this earlier, and it is off the charts. It's amazing. I'm so excited. And I did get his permission to kind of seed this out. So we're not speaking out of school. So what he's got is, or what he's building is this tool. So basically, let's say you wake up one morning and, because what's going to happen is you're not going to wake up one morning and your water heater doesn't work. You're going to wake up one morning and you're going to go to brush your teeth and take a shower. And you're going to step in the shower and go, holy crap, the shower is cold. What's going on? Why don't I have any hot water? And then you're going to go, oh, I don't have any hot water because this thing called a water heater is not making hot water. And then what do you do? And so his tool, you go downstairs or you go to wherever your water heater is, and you snap a picture of the little manufacturer's plate on it. Well, as soon as you do that, it goes, oh, well, this is a blankety blank brand water heater. It was manufactured, or this is the model number, and it was manufactured in this time period. And then you can say, you're interacting going, what seems to be the problem? Well, no hot water. Oh, well, that water heater is, 9 years old. The typical lifespan on that water heater is only 8 years old. The cost to replace is this, but, it might be the heating element. Would you like to run some simple diagnostics? You can probably run a couple of tests. But it puts you in sort of in the driver's seat and kind of walks you through this flow chart and says, if you want to run a couple of tests, here are the common things to do. If you just want to know what are the typical failure modes, it'll give you the list of typical failure modes. Based on those failure modes, if you want to try some self-diagnostic, you can do that. If you want to book a service appointment, you can do that. If you're like, you know what, this is crazy, I don't want to mess with it. This is 15 years old. It's probably beyond its useful life. Where can I buy another one? They're like, I'm glad you asked. It'll connect you with a retailer. It'll connect you with an installer, depending on what it is. And all that stuff is all happening in the background. And it's a super, the concept is so stupidly simple. I'm in love with it, right? It's just and we've all experienced it, right? You get up and again, you don't have hot water, or the oven doesn't work, or whatever. And you're like, oh my God, then what do I do? How old is this? And which brand is it? And which repair company do I call? And it just builds it all in. And it's a simple flow chart, but it's just okay, here you want service tech, or you want some diagnostic trials, maybe some videos. Over here, you want some repair services. Over here, you want some retailers. You can replace this. I mean, the concepts are super simple, but it just integrates all of it. And I look at that, and again, this thing's, I can't wait for him to bring it to market. I'm hoping it's going to come out about this fall, but that's one of the coolest things I've seen lately that uses a ton of data and some real intelligent, I don't know if it's AI or machine learning, but it's some cool stuff. So I love that as a way to solve a problem. That's a consumer problem, not a employee problem, but still, it's a cool set of problems that we all face.
Can I add one other thing that I really like about this?
Nail it, Ben. Go for it.
So what I like about what you're saying is that I'm taking I'm taking a piece of data that I have, I'm creating a tool or an automation, and I'm adding a little bit of revenue. Right.
He might say a lot of revenue, but yes.
Well, right. But what I mean is, let's say that the way he makes money in this is there's a referral to, he becomes an Amazon referral partner or whatever.
Right.
For the part that gets recommended here. Like, it's the easy button, you hit this and you make, 45 cents on that. Or if it's a more Angie's List model and, you're the repair person, that pays for, whatever his monetization is. Even because the costs are so low, all of the monetization is profit and bonus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really the opportunity of some of this data management, is now that it is easy to do things that were previously hard, you can do them with small margins with big impact.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Let me throw out another one, because I'm curious just in this thought, because this is another one that gets me excited from the research profession. Because a lot of times when tech comes into research, we don't play real well together, right? Because a lot of times it can be viewed from the inside, we view it as a race to the bottom. So how do we get cheaper? So it tends to be a more mainstream. So we're going more to the middle of the bell curve in terms of respondents, and we're doing that cheaper. Well, those are the easy ones to get anyway, and they're not all that expensive. So doing it faster, cheaper just has marginal increased utility. However, what gets me super excited, because again, in the intro, a lot of the work that we do is around pretty sensitive topics, right? Around education, food insecurity. A lot of times it can be around financial insecurity. And so you think about these sensitive topics. It's difficult to gather information around sensitive topics. And the more in-depth the type of information is, the more challenging it is. And I'll give you an example. So we were doing research on what's called the unbanked and the underbanked population, right? So these people who use, check into cash and pawn shops and things like that, maybe in addition to a checking account, or maybe even instead of a checking account. And so we were doing a series of focus groups. Now these happen to be chat-based focus groups, right? So nobody's on screen, no physical, just a first name. You don't have any faces. And somebody was talking about, they said, look, they were a landscaper. It's summer. They didn't get paid a whole lot. They didn't have a bank account. And they said, on an August day, at the end of the day, they're like, I'm going into the bank at 4:00 in the afternoon. They knew they were sweaty. They knew they didn't smell good. And they're like, I just don't want to spend $6 to get my check cashed. And I don't want people to look down on me because they were working hard all day, right? So when you're talking about subjects like that, that becomes a real challenge, right? And there are other things like that. Trauma, anything in the trauma categories like that. So now we've got some tools and they work reasonably well, but some of the new tools that are coming out are essentially bot-based interviewing, right? So it's AI bot-based interviewing. So now there are certain situations and certain populations where you might not want to talk to a person. No matter how well trained that moderator is going to be another human. Right? Maybe they look like you, maybe they don't, maybe their skills are good, maybe they're not, maybe they're having a good day or bad, whatever. But a bot all of a sudden can get kind of cool. And if we upload a good discussion guide, we're not just letting the bot just wing it, right? The bot is following a good discussion guide and a set of protocols and is well trained. Now all of a sudden we can talk about really, really sensitive topics, those really deep trauma topics. And so what it's allowing us to do, at least what we think it's going to allow us to do, is get farther and farther, if we're talking about that bell curve, farther and farther out when the x-axis might be like sensitivity. So that's a case where I think new tools coming in and just doing some really, really cool stuff, that we weren't able to do before, or was harder to do before, or extremely expensive to do before.
I mean, I think the other piece that, flows into this, and Sean, this is more your world than mine, is okay, when you're doing that and people are you're having that interaction, like, how do you set up your internal data pieces so that you are respecting their autonomy as a user? Like almost all of the, we talk about the evils of AI are related to people taking your data without your permission.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I think about, so the company that I run now, Essential Innovations, automates the application for tax credits for employers that are employing folks from historically marginalized populations. So if you've got a felony conviction, if you have been on food stamps or long-term unemployment, if you're a disabled veteran, like those are the folks that we mostly engage with on behalf of the employers. But that's like, those are groups that may or may not want to disclose that. And so one of the things that we really prioritize is, okay, at every part of this, are you authorizing us to use this data? Are we then what are we going to do with it? And we don't actually want to keep it at all. So we want to take it, create value out of it, and then either destroy it or pass it off to somebody who's going to archive it for us that we never have to think about again. So, I mean, I know you're much more into that world than I am. So I'd love, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so there are a few sort of general guidelines, if you will, and the way we always view it is you want to collect the minimum amount of information. Only collect what you absolutely need, and if you're not going to use it, don't get it. You don't want to have it in your possession. Like, we never have social security numbers, right? There's a ton of information like that that's very obvious that we don't have and we don't want. So collect the absolute minimum amount of information that you need. 2, once you have that information, restrict it to the fewest number of people possible. If they don't need access to it, then don't give them access to it. Even if they're a nice person and you trust them and they're a part of your team, if that part of your team doesn't need access to this project, don't give them access to it, because they just don't need it, right? And you just cut down that liability. So it's the minimum amount of information, minimum amount of access to that information, and then retain it for the minimum amount of time. Those are kind of like the 3 big guide rules. And candidly, I think that applies, in our case where, we're primary research, so we're generating our own data sets. We have to sort of deal with that like every single day, but it applies to, small businesses as well. Again, think about those employee forms. And I know there's like some IRS rules and whatnot in terms of how long you have to retain some of that stuff. But if you've got a digital copy and a paper copy, shred the paper copies, get rid of that, only keep the digital copy, and then maybe to Ben, to your point, put that into an archive where it has even more restrictions in terms of who can access it. It's harder to access it, harder to get to. You can do some really good sort of housekeeping around your data, if you will. But again, the biggest things that we go for: minimum amount of data, minimum access to the data, and the minimum length of time in terms of how you're going to retain it. Those are the big 3 things that we recommend for everybody, like the golden rules.
I love those, Sean. I think that's really cool stuff. That's really important kind of touchstones to keep in mind as you're managing data. I want to tease that out a little bit, but I also real quick want to remind all of our viewers, this is a conversation, and we would love to have your questions in here. While we've got these 2 brilliant minds on the topic, if you've got even a little bit of a roughly sketched out question, drop it in chat or put your name in chat and say you'd like to ask it, and we'll send you over a link so you can join us in the stream and verbally ask the question. But to keep us rolling on that one topic, Sean, you mentioned kind of those 3 sort of restrictive pillars. And although that makes a lot of sense to me, I feel like that almost runs counter to the stories we hear about most major kind of tech firms right now. You think about something like Meta or Alphabet or Amazon, and at least from my perspective, what I assume they're doing is collecting every teeny tiny little scrap of data they could possibly find, regardless of whether it seems to have any use or not, and make sure that they indelibly etch it upon some stone that has my social security number at the top, and make sure that they're never going to lose that, because maybe at some point they can find some way to get some tiny piece of revenue off some secret of mine. So I guess my question is, does that make that, is that activity patently evil, or is there some way that might be kind of a redemptive arc at some point? I don't know.
I'm gonna go in the patently evil camp. I mean, I like, this is one of the things that was shocking to me. A few years ago, we took a family trip to Europe, and my cell phone exploded with all of the ways that the apps that we have in the States violate the European rules around data privacy. And they were just like, nope, like literally just crossing the border. All of my phone was like, this isn't good. And I will make a plug around this, that these are the decisions that are being made by elected officials and the bureaucracies appointed by those elected officials. And they're bad. We are allowing too much control, not enough autonomy. And because this is Canopy, and we have intentionally articulated that we are trying to be social good companies, don't do that. Sean said it exactly right. Collect the data that you need to do the things that you need to do. Start with the problems and don't do more than that.
Hey, Ben, we had a good conversation. You and I had a good conversation. The three of us had a good conversation the other day, and you brought up consent to give the data. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can do a lot with people's data. I want to be able to add value, and some of that is in understanding more about that person's household, their behaviors. That's fine, as long as I am intentionally asking them and then re-asking them again on a regular basis, is it okay for me to try and create value out of your data? And if that is the case, if we're intentional, we make it simple, we don't stick it in a 70-page document where I probably have signed over the lives of my children multiple times. I don't know. I click agree. But that it makes it incumbent on the business to be thoughtful about how do we solicit the kind of consent that we want in a way that is human-centric and not evil.
I was going to say, and kind of honest, right? So it's real consent. Because I kind of feel like what Adam, where you were going in the beginning of that, and I agree with Ben's comment about inherently evil. I completely echo that. But we've probably consented to that, just like Ben said, right? We've consented to, collect all of our data. We've given Meta the permission to do that, along with, harvesting our organs and our children or whatever. I'm being facetious on that last part, obviously, but probably I haven't read all, maybe not. We have to read all the agreements. But the point is, and what I like about where Ben went is there's consent that we as consumers say, okay, you can use my data. But then there's sort of, let's just call it honesty on both sides going, okay, I said you can use my data, but I didn't say you could use my data for everything and forever, right? And I think those are two big things, is the restriction of the use and the restriction of the time period. And then I would add another piece in there, which the European countries are really good about, the right to revoke that consent. So even though I told you you could use it for XYZ period and purpose and whatever today, I could wake up tomorrow morning and change my mind for absolutely no reason whatsoever, and I don't owe you an excuse. All I should be able to do is click a button and say, nope, change my mind, stop it. You can't do anything forward after 6/27/2025. My data are off limits, and the company should respect that. And to Ben's point, I think he stated it very well. That is very hard to do in the U.S. It's easier in the European countries, and it varies quite a bit from company to company in the U.S. But in general, it's much harder.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about consent, and I think that's a really good starting point. But consent is actually only useful if it's informed consent, right? Like we can jump on Amazon and say, yeah, I'd like to order this packet of pencils, and it asks you to click a little box agreeing to a set of terms and conditions at the bottom, and you're spending $3 on a box of pencils, but there's a 70-page document if you click on that text. And honestly, there's not a human being on earth who's going in and reading that before they order those pencils. So how do we kind of navigate that line of making sure that we're asking for consent, but also making sure that the consent that we obtain is legitimate and informed and useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, being narrowly tailored around what you're trying to do with this, explaining it clearly, and then, backing off when you don't need it that anymore is really that's the direction for a good company to go. Because basically there are no rules about this. Like in the United States, you are allowed to do basically anything. I mean, I get in trouble when I use the name of this corporation, but it is a large corporation with which I have done some work. And they have the creepiest insights platform I have ever seen. They have 1,500 data points on every adult in America, and they have it on children, but it's anonymized because it only is tied to their address. And so here's a funny example, which could be used for good. So there are two kinds of people who regularly buy tennis shoes at like above average rates. You guys have any idea who those kinds of people are?
I'd say teenage boys.
Good thought. Yes, that's probably also true. That's not who I was thinking of. Let's call it two kinds of adults who regularly buy tennis shoes.
Oh, okay.
Like running shoes.
I mean, is runners too obvious an answer?
Nope. Runners is one of them.
Good.
That's the easy one. What's the hard one?
Ballet dancers.
People with pre-diabetes.
Who
have circulation issues.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you wanted to do marketing, you wanted to create insights, or you wanted to create some kind of proactive outreach, would you like to manage your diabetes? It's really important to be able to distinguish those two things.
Yep.
So this company says, okay, great. We're going to match those purchases against your magazine subscriptions and your sort of demographics. So if you're in this neighborhood and you get Runner's World, I'm not sending you pre-diabetes stuff. Right? I mean, the same sort of thing for these are people who probably are eligible for food stamps. Maybe aren't getting them. That's a net positive, right? If you are on the poverty line or the edge of, food stamps can be an additional $200 a month. That's a big deal. Yeah. But to do that proactive outreach, I have to collect lots of different data points, probably without your permission, smush them together, and then do something with it. So, I think this is where this gets a little bit morally complicated.
So I want to jump. So love that. So a couple things. So it's interesting. Yeah. Because the law, I think, is like really sort of crazy. There is, I will say this, within the research profession, every trade association, so the Insights Association, the American Association of Public Opinion Research, ESOMAR, which is the International Trade Association, Canada has, I mean, everybody, right, all the major countries have, but these codes of ethics, right? And they take them seriously. And every code of ethics has some version of, for instance, every time we conduct a survey, any response that's given to us on any survey of any of the studies that we do, we're getting thousands and tens of thousands of them, in some cases, tens of thousands a month. There is a statement of confidentiality that is assumed. If there is not a de facto explicit disclaimer saying that the data are not going to be confidential, then they are confidential, period, across the profession. Now, everybody who's in the profession, sort of legitimately and tied to the profession, would purport to adhere to those codes of ethics. Now, people doing things that look like that, people who look like they're doing surveys, may or may not, right, tied to those codes of ethics. So it is sort of weird where the law comes in and sort of like what the standard is, but within the research space, it kind of does get drilled into your head if you're into it after a while that, yeah, this is kind of a thing and you got to sort of respect those data. And there are some pieces about consent and some other stuff, but there's also some implied limitations. So even if you don't do anything else explicit, the tacit implications are that you're pretty limited, if you will, which I think is a good thing. I really do. I 100% support that. And we've gotten into it, with employers. If we're doing an employee engagement study, very rarely does somebody get sort of hot under the collar and they're like, well, I want to know who that is. Yeah, well, that must be nice to want, but you're not going to, I don't own any of that responsibility. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff there.
Well, all of those codes of ethics and things that are followed by trade organizations, that's all still voluntary, right? Like, and kind of as opposed to what Ben was talking about in Europe, where it's not voluntary, it's just the law and you have to do it. So if we were looking to try and sort of nudge American laws into a zone that we feel like is more human beneficial, that's going to be better for people in terms of their data management, what kinds of mouth sounds should we look at coming from politicians to say, yes, that's a thing we want versus no, that's a thing we don't want?
I mean, I would look at the consumer protection transparency stuff that we did a couple of years ago, where it just became, in your credit card statement, it now tells you in super clear, here's the format it must say. If you make the minimum payment on this credit card, it will take you 37 years to pay it off. Like, that's the sort of thing that we should be doing. And honestly, we've gotten some of that. I mean, we do see now in terms and conditions, can we mark like the cookies that pop up? Can we market, we market this to, additional third parties. Here's the stuff I actually just need to run my app. And then there's a menu. Like, we've gotten better about this, but that's the sort of mouth sound. I don't like that at all. That we should be looking for is more transparency around how data is used and how long it's used. Like, that's what we should be looking for, I think. Sean, you're the pro in that stuff.
No, I would agree, and you went to a slightly different angle, and I absolutely love it. I was thinking the GDPR, which I can't remember exactly what those initials stand for, but it's the European sort of European data privacy protocols, if you will, and they're extremely comprehensive, and they do talk about things like consent and storage and usage, and I mean, they are quite extensive, and I love those, and they're the law, right? And even they apply. I think this is kind of cool too. They apply, like my company here based in Louisville, Kentucky. If I've got a client who's multinational and has operations over in Europe, they apply to any work that I do from my office that impacts their citizens, those European citizens. And I love that too. So it isn't just, oh, you're a company out of the country, so ergo you can skirt the rules. Nope. The rules are very specific, and it talks about data and warehousing and encryption and limitations and usage and retention. And again, the consent and the right to remove consent, ad hoc, and even the ways that you have to allow the consumer to tell you, and even the amount of information that you have that the consumer can come in and say, I want to know what data you have on me. And we have to say, okay, cool. Let me find that. And we have to tell you, this is all the data that we have on you. And you have to disclose that. And I don't remember the numbers. Most of the companies, because again, we don't deal with it that much. But there are these automated systems, right? So you just go in, you're like, what data do you have on me? Boom. And then 15 minutes later, a PDF shows up in your inbox. And it's like, well, I don't like this. Click here. You can't use this anymore. Done. I mean, that's pretty dang cool. And really does put the consumer or the employee or whoever in control of their own stuff, which is kind of who ought to be in control of it, or at least have a say in it.
So how do companies that might not have that degree of sophistication, like, I realize we keep coming back to this restaurant thing because that's kind of my background, but running a restaurant, a brewery, a kitchen, I don't necessarily have profiles like that. Like, if someone comes in and has a cheeseburger next week, they can't send me an email and say, what data do you have on me? Like, I don't really have any way to generate that or get that to them, like, usefully. So what do I do to still be able to provide them security?
Well, so can I take the other side first, and then we'll talk about the security pieces? So this is a perfect example of, like, what's a problem I'm trying to solve, and how can the data I either get or want to get provide that? So, thinking about the restaurant business, and Adam, correct me here because you know a million pieces more than I do, but I think the two biggest levers for customers are like ticket size and then how often they come back. Is that right?
Yeah, for individual customers. I mean, again, your tools change based on the question.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
love like finding zip codes that credit card numbers come out of really helps us target who's coming in.
Okay. So yes. Perfect other example. Okay, great. If I'm coming from this zip code, my most valuable customers come from this zip code. So I might do targeted marketing to folks in that zip code, right? That's a good way of this is exhaust data. It's not something that I've spent any time or energy trying to collect. It's just something that comes into my universe, and then I can produce some actionable insight on that. Ticket composition might be interesting. People who order my cheeseburger are more likely to do these things. And that's an example of an insight that used to be hard. But now you could literally be like, all right, so here's the ticket size, here's the ticket composition, and here's the zip code. Now, what could I do with that? One step further to solve the problem that I want. I want bigger ticket size. Well, hey, what I learned is if I can upsell, people who buy hamburgers are then much more likely to also buy X. I can equip my servers with X. Or can I create a loyalty program where, I am doing outreach that is very targeted based on, hey, Ben went to Biscuit Belly and ordered the tots, and now I'm going to give him an incentive that if he comes in again, he gets free tots. And that's not exhaust data. That's intentional because you have to have said, okay, great, you will join the loyalty program, but can I make that easy? And then what insights can I do? If you bring a friend, we'll give you X. That's the kind of stuff that now, and those are all automations. Those used to be hard. That used to be a person, even when it was an email blast. Now this is not hard. It's a, if this, then this, we do this. And I think that there's value that gets created there. And Sean, I'll let you talk, and then I'll talk about a creepy example that failed doing something like this.
No, I think I'm just going to echo what you said, and I'm going to come back at him and go, well, so in that restaurant scenario, kind of to Ben's point, are you sure you don't have a lot of data? Because I bet you have more than you think you do, right? And so to Ben's point, if you go back and you look at your ticket sales and then you just run that longitudinally, right? Do you have a seasonal effect? So certainly you would have a day of the week effect. Maybe you have an hour of the day effect, right? Maybe to his point about composition, are people buying more cheeseburgers on Saturday than they are on Tuesday, right? So maybe if you're doing your upsell and you're trying to upsell a dessert with your servers, maybe you get really smart about that instead of, because you could just go, hey servers, why don't you just try and upsell and have people buy more stuff? Or you could say, hey servers, why don't we try and push the chocolate pie because I've got a really good margin on that? Or you could say, hey servers, you know what? We've noticed that desserts tend to sell really well on Saturdays. So maybe don't worry about it on Tuesday, but on Saturday, bring your A game. And by the way, that affects your tips too. So, so you can just start getting smarter about each one of these individual iterations. But again, going back to the very beginning, what are you trying to do? In that case, you're trying to increase ticket sales, which is different than trying to increase the periodicity, right? How often somebody comes in. They come in, once a week versus once a month, right? That you might have a different strategy for that. Or you want to have more people come in. Then you maybe are going to do that, bring a friend approach, right? So it all comes down to not just I'm trying to increase sales, but what specifically are you trying to do to increase sales? Because again, increasing average ticket price, increasing frequency, or increasing bringing of, have more people, more butts in seats. Those are three very different objectives and probably would require three different approaches. But the data system you have, just looking at ticket composition would matter. To Ben's point, bring in, your credit card data, right? Just go through it. If you accept credit cards, Chase has that built out on their portal. So you can go into, I'm sure everybody else does too, but go into Chase and you look at it and what are your zip codes that are, just look at what you have and start there and run it until you run out of value for that data set. And then go, dang it, now what do I do? Start with what you got and you can get real creative. It surprises people.
So here's my super creepy version of that. I worked with an entrepreneur who was using a license plate reader to customize digital drive-through displays. So it captured your license plate when you walked in, and then as you came around the bend, it changed the digital display based on your previous buys and what people who had your profile were most likely to buy.
Yep. It's funny in surveys of all things, right, where you can get really crazy and you can really customize them. There's an upper threshold that's much lower than you think, because the creepy factor. I mean, we did that one time for a chamber of commerce, and I was talking to somebody, and they're like, "How did you know I attended that event?" I'm like, because I've got your profile and I just uploaded it, and it was just part of the data set. And they're like, "Yeah, but I never." I mean, and people get bothered, right? So you get it, yeah, I can imagine LPR would really, a license plate reader would really kind of creep some people out. But it's technology, right? You can just go buy those things, right? It's crazy, but yeah, you got to watch it. You can get some people. You all know the example. I know we're running out of time. You guys all know the example, the data example of Target and the okay. We've all heard that one. The Target and the okay.
Oh, tell it. It's a great one.
Okay, so the short version is in the sort of the beginning of data analytics, when this was really becoming much more powerful and much more capable, both in terms of the techniques and the people and the data, et cetera. As the story goes, Target sent a targeted mailing for baby products, right? So like, I don't know, prenatal vitamins, whatever it happened to be, right? But it was something that you would send to pregnant women, right? And so somebody comes in, as the story goes, this dad comes in and he's like, "Who the heck do you think you are sending this to my 17-year-old daughter? You no good blankety blank so-and-so." And he's just apoplectic that Target would have sent his darling daughter this coupons and whatnot for babies, because how dare you even think such a thing? Well, it turns out she was pregnant. And the way Target knew that wasn't because she filled out a form or told anybody that she was pregnant, but Target had worked out through their algorithm that you bought certain things during the prenatal portion, and those certain things, whatever that composition, whatever that basket of goods was, had a very high prediction rate that if you did this in, let's say, in 4 months, you were going to be buying diapers. Her basket of goods indicated that she was pregnant, and mommy and daddy didn't know. And that's sort of a very well-known story. I mean, Ben knows it's a very well-known story in the data analytics world. I have no idea if it's true or not, but I believe very well it probably is. And even if it isn't factually true, it is pragmatically possible. And so, yeah, just an example. Which also says we should be mindful as consumers. What are the breadcrumbs we're laying down? The digital breadcrumbs we're laying down? That's real too.
So this is one of my takeaways as individuals, and I know we're focused on businesses, but like if you look at something and you can't see what the product is that is making somebody money, you are the product.
Yep.
So that is it. It's your eyeballs, it's your wallet. That's if you don't see someone else making money there, it's you, which might be fine. Like again, the consent pieces, I'm totally cool with people making money on me if that also adds value to my life.
But you've got to know what's happening.
I want to know what's happening.
Proactive, right? It's kind of the opt-in versus opt-out idea.
Yeah.
The default has to be we're not collecting anything unless you say we can. We're not using any of this data unless you say we can.
And we're disclosing what we're going to use it for.
Correct.
And as a consumer, last thing I'll throw in, being mindful that if you didn't opt in, it's probably being collected. If you're hanging out on Facebook for a couple hours a day for free, to Ben's point, you're what's being mined. It's not really free. It's being paid for somehow.
Well, I don't want to end on quite that dour a note, but I'm not really sure where else to go. So what I guess kind of leaving it in your all's hands with a few minutes left here. What's like one hopeful thing about this rich data ecosystem that we've suddenly stumbled into as a species that really presents a lot of opportunity for all our lives to get better?
My quick 2 cents would be, going back to your restaurant example, you've got more data than you think you do. Think about what problems you're dealing with and just go, what do I have? And just sit back, receipts, sales, everybody has that, right? Start there and just let your mind go crazy, and you can end up solving or at least furthering a lot of the problems that you're trying to solve with stuff that you've already got. It's just a matter of we're just not conditioned to really think about it that way. And that includes, I don't care how small your business is, right? You've got a lot more data than you think you do. Just get creative about it and see how far you can push it. And usually you'll be surprised in a positive way.
Yep. And I think I will piggyback on that. Start with the problems you have. Right. That is the just super articulate. I would love my salespeople don't have enough time for. I am trying to get higher ticket prices. Don't get overwhelmed with the, oh my God, it's AI. How do I spell it? Like, I think the piece of really, I'm still running a business. This is just a new tool. It's a powerful and important tool, but it's just a new tool in your toolkit.
Cool. Well, I think that's as good a note as any to send us off on. I appreciate you all coming out here. For all of you viewing, if you're a Canopy member, you'll soon be able to access the recording of today's session in the library section of our online certification portal. If you aren't a Canopy member yet, you can head over to canopyky.org to fix that. You can also sign up for our newsletter and come see us at any of our exciting events. From all of us at Canopy, thank you again to Sean and Ben, both of our speakers. And thank you to all of you watching, listening, and growing business beyond profit. We'll see you next time.